As a leader, you're not going to get people to follow you if you're not authentic and you're not real. And it was in that moment I said, I have to share my story.
Empathetic leadership sounds great on paper, but few of us buy it. An EY survey found that over half of employees find corporate attempts at empathy to be inauthentic. But CVS CEO Karen Lynch has a practical approach for building a truly empathetic workforce. She leads by example. Karen is upfront about her own mental health battles, including coping with her mom's suicide. She writes about it in her recently released book, Taking Up Space. Here's how Karen Lynch addresses mental health in the workplace. You talk more openly than any CEO I have ever talked to about mental health. I would just love for you to talk a little bit about why this is so important to you.
It's personal to me. And as you likely know, I lost my mom at 12. And for many, many years, and my mom died by suicide. And for many, many years, I wouldn't talk about it. And I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, and I found every other excuse not to talk about it. And I have a passion about mental health and physical health and bringing the kind of total health to the whole person. And I decided if I wanted to get people behind me to support my mission of how we can change healthcare, I had to share my story. And I shared it at a town hall, actually, when I was the president of Aetna. And I was overwhelmed and shocked by the comments and the outpouring of support, the sharing of stories, and it helped other people talk about their challenges.
Can you talk about that town hall? I can't imagine being there. There were 50,000 people, I think you said, who were tuned into it. You hadn't planned to talk about this. So what made this come out?
And I can put myself right in that, standing on stage and talking about our strategy and talking about the importance of changing the landscape of healthcare. And I stood there and said, as a leader, you're not going to get people to follow you if you're not authentic and you're not real. And it was in that moment I said, I have to share my story. And it was hard. And I just remember feeling like, okay, it's coming out and let's see what happens.
My God.
And
you had never really talked about
I
this?
never really talked about it, only, to my husband. And, he was the one encouraging me. At some point, you're going to have to talk about it because you're running a healthcare company and you're talking about mental health and physical health. And yet you've suffered some, pretty traumatic things in your life. And if you really think people are going to follow you, you need to share that story. And so I did. Afterwards, there was a woman who reached out. Lots of people reached out, but there was this one woman in particular that she just lost her son to suicide. And she said she didn't want to tell people. And she was, anxious about that. And she said, you made it okay. And I feel so much better now that I'm talking about it because maybe my story can help some other mom. I felt like a big weight was off my shoulder too. And it is fascinating because what I've learned throughout this journey of talking about it is most people have a story to tell.
Yeah.
Most people have a story to tell. And we're not going to get the health care that people need to support depression, anxiety, suicidal attempts if we don't talk about it and get people the help that they need.
Well, I think that people are more open to talking about these issues with friends and family, but the workplace is still a newer area to have these kind of discussions. And I think people and leaders are trying to figure out where the lines are. I'm going to read something that you said in your book. You said, as a woman with ambitions, I believe that if I showed off any vulnerability at all, people would take advantage of it, especially in a business setting. And you said that fear wasn't unwarranted. So can you talk about how employees should think about and leaders should think about when to be vulnerable and when not to?
I think there's an authenticity and a vulnerability that you can share. Like, you're not going to share, I had a fight with my, husband last night or whatever. But I think there's things that you can talk about that can make a difference. And, there's a fine line. I'm not saying, go share everything, but I think vulnerability is a part of an authentic leader. And I think that leadership definition has changed dramatically throughout my career. And I think there's such an important part about being authentic and being real, because the sign of leadership is not how you're leading. It's, are people following you to support your mission?
Being open about feelings is rare in the C-suite, but it's not a secret that it's a tough job. 1 in 3 C-suite executives constantly struggles with fatigue and poor mental health. That's according to Deloitte. And as many as 70% of executives have considered quitting their jobs to try to reset their emotional balance. What Karen is pushing for is to be open about these struggles, which leads to better work experience and has a ripple effect on the entire workforce. In another study from EY, empathetic leadership can lead to increased productivity and reduced turnover. Easy to say, not so easy to do. Karen knows this and has found ways to teach her leaders to be empathetic. One of the things you talk about in the book as a way that you remain empathetic is you take customer calls. Mm-hmm. People write you letters, they leave voicemails, they find some way to reach you. One of the other things you do is simulations. Can you talk a little bit about what those are like, what it's like to actually deal with CVS? So one of the ones you talk about in your book is getting a prescription when you have Medicaid. And I think that you kind of run your teams through that.
Yeah.
Is that part of this idea of building empathy?
Yeah, one of the things we did, that was a training program that we put all of our executives through. We called it A Day in the Life of a Medicaid Patient. And we simulated the whole experience. And what we wanted our executives to see what it was like and how they interacted with our company. And it was really to, 1, teach empathy, 2, to look at our processes and make sure that they made sense for the way customers engage with us. And it was enlightening for all of us. So it gave us the ability to change out some of the things that we were doing. But I remember what was fascinating to me was just the debrief of the entire executive team, where we were, wow, we really never understood it until today. I highly recommend doing those kinds of things, a day in life of a customer.
A frequent debate we have here is, do hard times make for great leaders? Do you have to be someone who has really had their back up against the wall and has faced difficult situations to be a leader who can make a difference? You are someone who your mom died of suicide. You were raised by your aunt who was under incredible financial strain. And I'm curious whether you think that has made you the leader you are, and whether you think that's a requirement for being a great leader.
I don't think it's a requirement for being a great leader. I think it's made me a stronger leader from kind of overcoming adversity. But what I always, sort of my philosophy is, know what you want to do. And if it's worth doing, have a passion about it, and then be the best that you can at doing it. And I think that that's sort of a leadership lesson for anybody. I would say for me, it just happened to be that I kind of went through a fair amount of barriers, but it's made me a much more empathetic leader. It's made me a authentic leader, and it's made me incredibly resilient. And all of those are key traits of any leader. It's not about who you're leading. It's really more about who's following you. And do you have that followership? I often talk to my leaders about, how are you creating followership? A lot of times you don't lead from the front. You lead from the side, and you lead from behind. And those are signs of really great leaders.
What kind of advice do you give people who are both at the beginning of their career and maybe they don't know what they want to do?
Here's what I would say. Find something that you're passionate about, and worry about what you can control, and be the best at whatever it is that you choose. And don't let other people tell you you can't, because you can.
Here's what stood out to me. The image of leaders as unshakable and infallible is outdated. Today's leadership demands authenticity and vulnerability. But empathy isn't just about opening up. It requires structured training and clear guidelines. It's about strategic sharing that sparks a movement within the company toward a shared mission. For Karen, the mission was improving mental health services at CVS. Her approach involved training to truly integrate empathy within leadership practices. When done right, empathy not only connects teams, but also serves as an effective tool for boosting morale. We talk more about this in the This Is Working podcast. Meanwhile, tell me, what do you think is appropriate to share in the workplace? Let me know in the comments.